We are talking LA Kings offseason moves and more with the LA Kings Insider Zach Dooley on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that now is in its 19th season, covering the NHL, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, we are happy to welcome back to the show the manager of editorial content for the LA Kings, more commonly known as the Kings Insider. He is Zach Dooley. You can follow him on X and Twitter at DooleyLAK, and of course, check out his work at LAKingsInsider.com. Hey, Zach, how are you?
Eddie, doing great, man. How about you?
Doing okay. I know you're getting ready to take some well-earned time off, so we appreciate you getting us in before heading to break there. The last time we talked was in February, and clearly a lot of things have happened with the LA Kings since then. And when I think of the Kings from this past season, it's a tale of two seasons. It's the regular season and the postseason. How do you look back at last year when you look at the season as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to you. Such a disappointing end to what was a really good season. 105 points, probably the best team the Kings have had since kind of coming out of this rebuild. And I think that's what makes this playoff run the most disappointing, is because I think that a lot of people would agree that this team was good enough to win that series. And I don't think you could have said that in 23-24. But I think that the 24-25 team was truly good enough to win that first round series. I think they had enough to kind of get over that hump. And the fact that they weren't able to do so was a really tough end to take to what was such a good season and then such a good start to that playoff series. So it's hard to put it all into the picture, because for so long, this was a really good year. But at the end of the day, it's about postseason success, right? And the Kings weren't able to get the job done. And I think the fact that this team was good enough to get the job done was what made it that much more disappointing for me.
I agree. And I think that's one of the difficult things that Kings fans and maybe the organization themselves are kind of wrestling with. How close is this team? Because you look at the regular season, you could certainly make an argument they were one of the better teams in the NHL. And you also look at the Oilers have gone to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row. That's the team that's eliminated the Kings. At the same time, the results are what they are. They haven't gotten the job done. So is it this team can't get it done, or is it we're close, we just got to keep making the tweaks and adjustments? It seems like it's the latter at this point for the organization, right?
That's certainly the approach they're taking. Whether it's right or wrong, I guess time will tell. I think that if you look at they lost in 6, but if you look at the way that they lost, I do think that maybe adds that it is more towards the latter, right? If you look at, it's the coach's challenge, or it's, maybe it's deployment in certain games, it's the sitting back, especially in 3 and 4. Like, the Kings were just as close to sweeping that series, it felt like, as they were to losing in 6. Games 3, they led in the third period. Game 4, they led in the third period. Like, there were a lot of opportunities to get over that hump, but they weren't able to do it, right? So you could what if it all day. Fact of the matter is they were not able to do it. I think that the Kings, as they stand right now, probably still need a little bit to get over that hump. But at the same time, that's probably something that's going to come in season, or at the deadline. It feels like the roster the Kings have right now is probably what we'll see more or less going into the regular season. If something crazy were to present itself, the Kings have ample space to make another move if they wanted to. But I don't think that impact move is out there right now. So I think that the moves the Kings made, I thought had a pretty clear focus to them, whether you like them or not, fair. But I think that it's pretty clear that they felt that they lacked in a couple of areas in the postseason specifically. And the moves made were not really meant to take a 105-point team to a 115-point team. It was hopefully meant to take a team that lost in round one to a team that could go on a run in the postseason.
Was there anything in particular about that postseason defeat that surprised you more than anything else when it came to, breaking down the matchup, going into it, and then how it kind of evolved and how it finished up?
Maybe how in control the Kings were early in the series. Like you expected them to come out well, but to come out and really dominate the bulk of games 1 and 2, I thought set a tone that maybe I wasn't expecting to see. And then to be as close as they were in 3 and 4, and come up short. I didn't think the Kings would be in control of games 1 through 4 with a chance to win each of those games as much as they were. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard being guys who win that series for the Oilers, I don't think should be a surprise to anybody. I think that a lot of the Kings players who had good series were the guys that you might have expected to, or wanted to have a good series. I wouldn't say there was anything particularly surprising, but the way that the series was lost is still one that I think would sting with a lot of people, myself included, having watched. Tough, man. It was like 3 months ago. It's kind of crazy to think it's been that long, but nothing this deep in like stands out as being like, oh wow, that shocked me.
Yeah, I know when I don't know how much you watched of the playoffs after the Kings were eliminated, but I watched it all, and you get to that final and you're just like, my God. And it reminds you how hard it is to get to that point, and how much hockey is played after the first round. I did want to talk to you obviously about some of the positives from last season. And when you look at the younger guys, Byfield, LaFerriere, Clark, Turcotte, would you say all 4 of those guys had a positive last season when it was all said and done?
I think so. I think that Byfield, I thought he had a really slow start. And I think it took him about half the year to really get going. But once he did, I thought we saw for the first time glimpses of that dominant center who was coming up through the system with so much excitement. Like he had a great year. He had a good year the year before, but he was on the wing. He wasn't driving his own line. I thought that from like maybe mid-January on, we saw the Quinton Byfield that we all knew was in there, but it just took a little bit longer to come out. So I think that you'd like to see him be more consistent over 82 games from a production standpoint, but I thought that I saw the best version of Quinton Byfield that we've seen yet in the second half of the year, and I think that is pretty exciting for him. LaFerriere almost got 20 goals. You think back at how many Kings struggled offensively early in the season, but Alex LaFerriere didn't, right? He had almost all of his production early. It was LaFerriere, it was Kopitar, and it was Kempe. If Laff doesn't play as well as he did early in the year, you wonder maybe the Kings don't win as many games as they did. He was one of those reliable players that helped kind of power the team in the first few months of the year, and then he had his slump. But when you look at his slump, his play was still pretty good. The underlying numbers, the chances created were actually better when he wasn't scoring than when he was. So that gives you some data that says the slump, the lack of goals isn't going to stay. So I thought he had a really strong year. Brant Clark obviously had his ups and downs. Really productive early. The production kind of dried up. Lost favor with the coaching staff for a little bit in the middle of the year. And I thought he finished really strong. And what was the most exciting for me about Clark was I thought his best hockey was March and April. I thought that he was at his best at the end of the year. And that's what you want to see from a young player. It's so easy to forget that was his first full year in the NHL. Like he had never played 82 games. He'd never gone through the full grind of an NHL season. Never experienced what was different, between January and October or October and March or April. Never went through the playoffs. For him to go through that year and get better as he went on, culminating in what I thought was a pretty good playoff series, I think was really important for Brant Clark. And he's a guy who I think has more steps to take. And for the Kings to get to where they need to get to, he's going to have to do that, starting this year. And then with Alex Turcotte, like the health was great. He played the bulk of the season. That was really important. He showed he could play higher in the lineup. He showed he can play lower in the lineup. I'm a big Alex Turcotte fan. I thought that he had a really strong season. And the best ability is availability sometimes. And we saw that when he could just play and when he could stay in the lineup and when he could show what he could do, there's a good player in there. So I don't think it was perfect for any of those four guys, but I noticed a lot of, I thought, encouraging signs from each of the four that you mentioned.
Well, it's been a busy offseason to say the least. We'll discuss that and more as we continue with Zach Dooley here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You ever decided at the last minute to head out to the ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime can help you out. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress, without the money that you'll save. You can splurge on other things like food, drink, merch, or even get a bigger group of friends to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. They help you buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. They've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On Major League Baseball and makes it easy to browse the app for the latest games for the Dodgers and the Angels. Get last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we are continuing with Kings Insider Zach Dooley. You can follow him on X and Twitter at DooleyLAK. And since we last spoke, we have a new general manager for the LA Kings. Rob Blake is gone. Ken Holland has taken over. What do you think about the role that Ken Holland has kind of been asked to take with this team? Again, kind of falling back on what we were talking about earlier, a very successful regular season team, but a team that hasn't got it done in the playoffs. Kind of brought in specifically to address that issue, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you asked earlier, right? Where does the organization see itself as, being far away from getting over, or is it tweaks? I think bringing in Ken Holland suggests that they believe that they are close to getting over the hump. I don't think you bring in a Ken Holland for a 7-year project. I think you bring in a Ken Holland to achieve success right now. I mean, Andre Kopitar, we know where he's at in his career. He doesn't have too long left by his own admission. This could be his last year, or if it's not, it's got to be close. It could be 1 or 2 more, maybe depending on where he's at. But yeah, I don't think he is here to rebuild this thing for the long haul. I think he's here to make moves that help the Kings win right now. And that seems to be his MO. Like, he wants to help get this team over the round 1 hump, certainly, and then go beyond that. And I think he's here to do it sooner rather than later.
Is it your understanding that the Kings were interested in making some big signings? Certainly Mitch Marner's name had come up, but in the end, it just wasn't something that worked out for the Kings, but it wasn't for a lack of want necessarily?
Certainly the impression I got, right? I mean, you don't always know names, but even going back to the trade deadline, it sounded like the Kings were willing to take bigger swings than ultimately they did make. So I think that's fair. I think there was certainly an intention to add those higher end players if it worked out. But I can't imagine the Kings were the only team with interest in, say, a Mitch Marner. I imagine a lot of teams had interest in Mitch Marner. So you saw a lot of roster projections that had Mitch Marner on them for the Kings, right? And he can only go to one place. I think there are a lot of roster projections on a lot of teams that had Mitch Marner coming in. So yeah, I do think that the Kings would have liked to have made some of those moves if they could have, but for one reason or another, whether it be via a trade or a signing, they weren't able to land like that big fish, if you will.
Before we get into who they were able to land, I did want to talk about a couple players that are no longer with the Kings, in particular, Vladislav Gavrikov and Jordan Spence. We'll start with Gavrikov. I always had the impression that he was pretty happy here and that I was optimistic about him staying here. I don't know what the numbers were, obviously, and you don't either as far as years and whatever. I was a little surprised that he left, and now it seems like in hindsight that he really wanted to go to New York. I mean, it's just kind of speculation, but just trying to read in between the lines, seemed like that was a place he really wanted to go to. Were you at all surprised that he decided to leave?
Not necessarily, because there was a lot of smoke around it with New York specifically going in. I would have been surprised if he went somewhere else, certainly. But it felt 50-50 to me because you're right. It did seem like he liked it here. It seemed like his family liked it here. He was a good fit system-wise on the ice for the way the Kings played. And it seemed to be a good fit off the ice. Personally, I'm never all that surprised when a player leaves. Like if you get to that point in your career, you're a free agent, you've earned the right to pick exactly where you want to go, to sign exactly the contract you want to sign. So that's part of the game, right? Like if you get to that point, the player has earned that freedom to move on. A little bit surprised maybe, but also like it sounded like the Kings made a reasonably competitive offer. Ken Holland said that the difference was in dollars, not years, in terms of what they agreed to with the Gavrikov camp. I'm not exactly sure, like you said, exactly where the gap was, but ultimately one of those, I was maybe a little surprised that the contract signed was what it was. I thought it might be a little bit more on the AAV than it turned out to be. But as far as him deciding to go to New York, I wouldn't say I was shocked, just considering how much buzz there seemed to be around that, even going into July 1.
Ultimately, wasn't surprised about the Jordan Spence trade because there had been a lot of smoke around that, if you will. Although I think I was a little surprised at how he kind of seemed to fall out of favor so quickly with the coaching staff. And we saw obviously his minutes and how much he played. I know he was a healthy scratch a couple times during the season, but he was also a young player. That didn't really raise any alarms with me necessarily. Were you surprised at all how quickly it seemed like he wasn't in the plans anymore?
A little bit, yeah. Thought he had a tough game one in the postseason. If you look at the numbers, didn't have a great game one. But I did think, yeah, that maybe the sample size coming into the playoffs would have outweighed, say, a tough period or a tough stretch in the opening game of the playoffs. So it did feel like the leash was shorter than I thought it would be. I thought that the Kings had kind of established those three pairs that they liked. Obviously, Anderson Doughty, was Gavrikov, Spence, and then Edmondson Clark. It went from 6 to 5 a lot faster, I think, than I would have thought. And once it got to the offseason, I wasn't surprised to see Jordan Spence traded, but I was surprised, yeah, with how quickly it got to that point of where it didn't seem like he was either in favor or trusted in those high leverage situations, come a playoff series.
One player that did return was Andrei Kuzmenko. Seemed like a great fit in his short time with the Kings coming over the trade deadline. Do you anticipate his role being exactly what we saw a year ago?
I would think so. He fit like a glove, right? Both 5-on-5 and on the power play. Like Kopitar and Kempe had felt like 10 different wingers before he got there, and he was a good fit with those guys at 5-on-5. And I mean, the power play really, really struggled until the trade deadline, and he brought so much energy, so much life to it. It was among the worst in the league before the trade deadline and one of the best in the league after he got there. I mean, this is crazy, but between the playoffs and regular season after the deadline, the Kings scored more power play goals in that stretch than they did in the 60 games before it. So I think that right there tells you that he was a really good fit. I was happy that the Kings were able to retain him, and I think that the contract kind of works for both sides. I think Kuzmenko is a guy whose abilities are better than a 1-year by $4 million deal. And this is his year to prove that. If he can go out and have another really strong year, he sets himself up for a long-term commitment, whether that's with the Kings or somewhere else. And for the Kings, they get a player who fit in really well at a reduced hit without a long-term commitment. And they save themselves kind of that risk of a guy who has had big years in the past, but hasn't always followed them up in year two. So I was really happy to see both that Kuzmenko came back and that he did so at what felt like kind of a win-win contract for both sides.
And I believe I heard Ken Holland, I don't know if Jim Hiller addressed it, but I believe I heard him mention that the plan is to continue with the 5 forwards on the number 1 power play unit going forward.
Yeah, that was Holland. And I mean, I don't know if you would agree, but I thought it was by far the most dangerous that the Kings looked all year was when they went 5 forwards. It seems to best accommodate the pieces in place. So I would hope personally that does continue and that it gets a little bit longer of a leash if it doesn't work right away, because we saw how good it could be.
All right, up next, we're going to talk about some of those new players that have brought in, including one that a lot of Kings fans are having a tough time thinking he's now on our team. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one spot. And you're not just managing your money anymore. You're starting to build wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, we're wrapping it up with the Kings Insider Zach Dooley. You can check out his work at lakingsinsider.com. The Kings added 5 veteran players in free agency: Corey Perry and Joel Armia as forwards, defenseman Brian Dumoulin and Cody Ceci, and a backup goalie in Anton Forsberg. Your take on those veteran additions for the Kings?
I look at it like this. I think up front, I think that the Kings got better, and I think it would be hard to dispute that. In goal, I think the Kings got more stable. If you look at David Riddick, the numbers might not be all that different, but Riddick kind of had a lot of highs and lows, whereas I see Forsberg is a little bit more down the middle. So I don't know if you would say better, maybe a little, but I think just more stable at a backup position is important. And on the blue line, I think there are more question marks this year than there were last year. I think Gavrikov, I thought, had his best year last year, and that was at a top pairing level. And I don't know if the Kings brought in a top pairing defenseman to replace him. So I think it brings the question marks that come along with the signings that the Kings made, and reliance on either internal improvements, internal returns to form, or internal growth to kind of replace by committee what Gavrikov brought. So I think the defense is where you would point to the question marks. I think up front, if you can look past the Corey Perry of it all, the Kings got better. And I'm happy, with what they did in net personally.
Yeah, Corey Perry is certainly a very interesting situation. On the one hand, what he brings to the table and what he can do to help the Kings in that regard makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, there's the personal side of it with a lot of fans who loved to hate him for many, many years with the Ducks, and of course lately with the Oilers as well. So it is, I'm in this as well as a fan. I on the one hand, I get the signing, but on the other hand, there's a lot of baggage there that he's bringing with him. It'll be really curious to see how Kings fans decide to embrace him or not as things go along. But I guess for him, all he can do is try and continue to play that role. And if he can do that, maybe he can win some of the fans over.
Like if you took everything about Corey Perry but his name was Eddie Garcia, I think everybody would be fired up, right? Like he's the kind of player who you're like, oh, this is the kind of move that a team looking to get over the hump makes. Like he's a veteran guy, playoff performer. He's a dog, right? Like he's the kind of guy who can excel in those tough to excel in moments. That being said, one of the best players in Anaheim Ducks history. And not only is he that, but he's one of the best agitators and over the line, on the line players the game's seen in a long time. So I think it will be difficult. My thoughts, and I don't know this, but it kind of feels like it's going to be uneasy until he does something notable that benefits the Kings. And then it's going to be like, okay, like he's with us now. But I do think that first time that he takes the ice on October 7th at Crypto.com Arena in the Kings black and white, it's going to be a little bit weird, isn't it, to see a player who has been the enemy for so long be on the Kings side of the ice. And I think it might take a little while to get over, but I do think that eventually, if he plays the way that he has against the Kings with the Oilers, if he does that for the Kings, I think Kings fans in time will at least come to appreciate what he's bringing to the team.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it'll also be very interesting the first time he goes to Anaheim wearing a Kings jersey as well. there's a lot of things that are going to be very curious. I don't even know how I will react to it until it kind of happens, but it's certainly something fun to watch and see how it kind of evolves, because we haven't been put in this kind of situation. I don't know, maybe ever, considering the caliber of player he has been, to now come over and wear the Kings jersey. It's going to be very, very interesting for sure.
Because it's not just a star player, right? It's not, if it was Ryan Getzlaf, I think it'd be easier because he played the game one way. But I think that the way that Corey Perry plays, not only was it a duck, but it was the way that Corey Perry plays, I think makes it so unique that you're right. Like, I don't think there's a comparable. I can't think of one in my time here, and you'd know more than I would. So I think it is very unique.
Yeah, it is funny talking to some old school Kings fans, and they talk that way about Wayne Gretzky, although certainly not the type of player, but a guy that they hated for a long time when he was in Edmonton. And then when he came to LA, they had a hard time completely grasping that, which is for somebody like me who got into the Kings because of Gretzky in part. It was interesting to hear them talk about him in that way, but I could understand it looking back on it. Jim Hiller, when we talked about the Kings season, I don't know if there's a better reflection of that than Jim Hiller. When you think about his first full season as an NHL head coach, to have a team set a record for home wins, tying points and wins in a season in franchise history. And then obviously in the postseason, there were some questionable decisions and certainly the second guessing. I don't know if he's on the hot seat. He's certainly under the microscope, but I mean, obviously Ken Holland showing faith in him and his staff, in that was a question that was quickly answered, in that he's back. This is his team, and it's his chance to, obviously, if he can get the Kings over that hump, then all will, somewhat be forgotten. But it's certainly a big season for Jim Hiller.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, like, when you talk about a GM coming in to win soon, that means that the coach and the players have to be able to win soon. So I think that you're right on that front. I mean, it's tough because this is a guy who he got several votes for the Jack Adams, right? Like, he was thought of as one of the best coaches in the league this year. And then come the postseason, there's a few moments, obviously the coach's challenge was a big one. He did not tell the team to sit back, but the team did sit back. And ultimately, style of play does fall on the coaching staff, whether or not it was instructive or not. And then there's management of players in certain roles. And I think those three things will stick with Jim Hiller for a long time, right? Like, there were a lot of question marks kind of about him coming into last year. And I really didn't feel like the narrative changed until like February, March range. I think it took a while for that narrative to change. And I think that it's going to take a while this year to do so. And ultimately, it's going to come down to if he can get the team back into the postseason, can they get over that hump? And I think it could take that long for perceptions of him to either remain the same or to change. And I don't think it's going to be the Kings win 5 straight to start the year. Oh, it's all good. Like, I think it's going to be a long play. And, Ken Holland said, like, before free agency, I have to find some players for the bottom 6 that the coach feels more comfortable playing. I think that Ken Holland did that. I think that the Kings will have 4 lines the coach will be more comfortable playing. And whether you agree with the moves made on the blue line or not, I think that the GM acquired players that coaches are comfortable playing. You look at CC and Dumoulin, heavily relied on by just about every coach they've played for in the postseason. I think now there will be 6 defensemen that the coach should feel comfortable playing. So I think that element of it should not be an excuse. I think that the personnel is now there, and it's a matter of, they've talked about it, Holland and Hiller. And is it a younger head coach who I thought did a lot of really good things during the regular season? Does he learn from last year's postseason? And ultimately, is he the guy to kind of get the team over the hump?
Well, Zach, I know you're taking some well-deserved time off here. Like I said, I'm pleased that you could squeeze us in here before you headed out. You got any plans, any big things you're going to do while you're taking a little time off here?
Yeah, I've got a European vacation coming up, going to Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. So going for a couple weeks, get out and explore some places that my wife and I thought were really cool and never had the chance to go to. So very excited to get out of here for a while and check out some really cool places.
That does sound very cool. Safe travels, enjoy it, and we will talk to you again, I'm sure, before the season or right around when the season gets going, and we'll start it all over again and see what kind of journey these LA Kings take us again. But always great to read your stuff. You guys make sure you check out the Kings Insider, lakingsinsider.com, and Zach is very active on X and Twitter at Dooley LAK. Always a pleasure, Zach. Thanks. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Always appreciate it when Zach Dooley joins us. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up, we will have at the end of the week our Kings fan feedback show once again. Your chance to share what's on your mind when it comes to the LA Kings. If you want to get an email in for the feedback show, it is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, the email address EDDIE. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, always welcome your comments in the comment section. Stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings. Also on Facebook, facebook.com/Locked On LA Kings. And if you're interested in getting some more coverage of the Kings, some special features, you can also help support me by sending me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com, and we'll give you the information on that. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.